of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I haven't looked at the papers. Do we have anyone who has signed up to speak tonight? No speakers? Okay, great. It will be a short meeting then, we hope. Okay. We've already done the pledge, Mr. Keener.
Okay.
No
thank you.
speakers. Turn it over to you.
All right, and so we call the meeting to order. We have no residents' request to address the board this evening. So if we will move on to the policy portion of the meeting, Dr. Musser has policies regarding postgraduate students, social events, class trips, pregnant students, bullying, cyberbullying, and student recruitment, and finally, responsible use of electronic resources. So policy 205, Dr. Musser.
Sure, thank you. As I shared with the board before, we work our way through policies when there's legal changes that require us to change our policies, when there's structural changes or administrative changes in the district that require to change our policies. And then sometimes we change our policies just because of revision dates. So there's a couple policies on the agenda tonight that we will be addressing strictly because of revision dates. Not a lot of changes on these policies, but yet we still need to manage and maintain these policies. So I'll go through them in the order they're on the agenda, and we can go from there. So our first policy up is just 205. And again, a very simple, short policy, but is still required for us to have, just simply stating that the school board is committed to students and that we're not going to engage in some of the creative post-secondary options that are out there. If you recall, we had some situations in the past where we had to work with families that were looking for the district to pay for options past the traditional high school. So this policy basically says we won't do that. This policy is also the most current policy as PSBA has represented as well. So we are suggesting no changes. I'm looking simply to have a last revision date up there, updated to a more current date to bring us in line with our other policies.
All right, thank you, Dr. Musser. Any questions or concerns about policy 205?
No.
All right, since there are no changes, any objection to moving it directly to second reading?
No.
All right, we'll move 205 to second reading. 231.
Thank you. So 231, much in the same boat as the previous policy. This policy refers to student events, class trips, things of that nature. During the pandemic there, we certainly were not taking a lot of trips, but this policy is still a policy that we were following and using for when we take trips, making sure that there's the appropriate supervision, the appropriate planning, that students have the right to attend these trips and that they support the school programming. So again, this policy here, we are not recommending any changes for. I'm looking for a revision date again.
All right, 231, any questions or comments? And I understand that Mr. Mauer and Mr. Garber are online, so Mr. Mauer and Mr. Garber, please chime in if you would like to.
We're good. I'm good.
Good, thank you.
All right, hearing no comments, any objection to moving 231 to second reading? All right. 234, pregnant students.
So a little bit different here. This was a policy I actually looked in to see if the district needed to maintain this policy at all, because we are managing students without the need of this policy as far as systems in place. This policy is a little bit, I would say a little bit dated. When it was students that were pregnant were denied education. That has not been the case, at least in this district, for a number of years. But there are some changes that I do recommend, and we do recommend maintaining this policy strictly from a liability standpoint. In working with PSBA and some others, it was suggested that it is best to have this policy shared. And as long as you're following this policy, you can always refer to this policy as opposed to just having procedures somewhere that the district follows. So I am recommending we maintain it. I am recommending that we update it to the most current language, which you see there added in yellow. The pieces that are there, when it says the district will pay for different placements, those are all decisions that the district holds the final decision on, and the superintendent as well as approving those placements. So if a student were unable to, education was unable to be facilitated in the traditional high school schedule, we can make adjustments to make sure that that student can continue with their educational career. The counseling pieces were also already in our programming. We just made some slight corrections to the student to represent the current policy.
Questions about policy 234 as revised? My question is, why are we striking the last clause under purpose?
Because it's redundant. It's no longer needed. It's in part of the code piece there. That's my understanding.
I'm sorry?
It's redundant. It's in the actual code policy there. With the code, the footnotes in there. My understanding is it's redundant, and that's why it was recommended to be removed from the policy.
It seems to say something different, though. One says we're not going to discriminate against someone because they're pregnant or married, which of course we wouldn't do. But then the other one reminds us that simply saying that you are pregnant and married without more is not in of itself an excuse to violate the compulsory attendance rules.
Correct. We're still required to provide instruction to those students. It's redundant. Like, we're still required to. We have to, even in our other statement that we just went over up until the age of 21. But they are still subject to all the attendance pieces.
Dr. Musser, this is Jim.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
A question for you. Does this have any impact on a male married student?
We've never had that case. As far as if it was a situation where they were supporting a family,
Yes.
we would apply this policy.
Okay. Maybe instead of the words her, then it should be them. I
Sure.
think there were a few places where I noted the word her, and you could just say them, being that individual. I forget where I saw it here. Hang on.
I really don't understand the purpose of this policy at all in today's day and age. I mean, of course, we're not going to discriminate against someone because they're pregnant or they're married.
So if it is the board's desire, and again, I would tell you if I felt strongly one way or another, if it's the board's desire to remove this policy, I did investigate the removing of the policy. It is certainly something we can do. We are managing these situations without the policy. It's an extra level of protection is what was stated to me from PSBA. If the board wants to remove this policy, there are other districts in our IU that also have removed this policy.
thoughts or comments?
I'm in favor of keeping it, Grant. I think in today's day and age, it's better to be more comprehensive in our policy. And frankly, being the product of such a situation, I'm in favor of this. My mother never got to graduate with her class.
I agree with Jim. I think there's no reason, unless administration feels a strong reason to get rid of the policy. I feel like there's no reason to get rid of it when it doesn't really cause any problem.
Other comments?
I would agree, but I think probably there's some language that needs to be more
So this is-
specific or kind of cleaned up.
This is PSBA's direct language, so we would have to clean up some of the language to encompass the situation that Mr. Maurer was referring to.
Right.
Yeah, there are a couple places down under the guidelines where it specifically starts to say her, and maybe it should just be restated to say them. I don't know. I'm fine with it either way.
It has a student in a lot of those places. Sometimes though, it's referring to the counseling services for the actual female.
Okay,
That probably would not be something we would apply in that situation.
I
but
get
again,
it.
With that context, I can certainly clean those up. Those are small changes. If the board's comfortable with the other changes, we can certainly move forward.
I'm fine with that.
Language, gender inclusive,
Correct.
like parents of infants as, okay.
I mean, if you just want to finish that up and email it to me, that would work as well.
No, I think you're very,
Fair enough.
So I have another question. We're certifying pregnancy from a position. Do we certify legal?
So
marriage,
we
relationship, or-
do want that because
Well,
of
I don't object to that, but if we're talking about a father.
yeah. So going back to
Having-
my original point, this policy is somewhat dated in that case. We're managing a bunch of different situations that have an impact on the traditional student showing up in the traditional manner. So yeah, yes.
You guys are all competent enough, in my view, to manage that situation. I leave the changes to the policy to your discretion.
okay, so what I'm hearing is we're gonna ask the administration to clean up some of the language here and bring it back to the next policy committee meeting.
I'm in no rush to move anything through. I just, again, this one came to us as a date that needs to be updated to be more current.
I'm fine to actually push it through, Grant, to second reading with minor changes.
Well, I think procedures. I'm not sure I agree with that. There's some significant changes here. There's questions around the verbiage. We could do a first reading or something like that, but in my opinion, there's too much here to push it straight to second reading.
And first reading, I would recommend.
All right, so what we'll do then is, Dr. Muster, if you could clean the language up, maybe circulate it to the board, and then we'll send it to first reading.
Fair enough.
All right. Thank you. 249, bullying and cyberbullying.
So this policy is not something that's coming to you because of a date. This policy is something that we do revisit and we're required to revisit on a regular cycle to maintain our safe schools reports. Some of the changes that you'll see that are highlighted here are all in this section here. I draw your attention to the first paragraph. That is a result of the new threat assessment requirements that came out for schools to follow, that if there is a safety situation that we must refer that student to the threat assessment team. So that is something that is new this year. The other part that is new with this policy is the Title IX linkage, which you see right there. And the confidentiality piece that we will continue to manage the confidentiality of all parties involved for the obvious reasons when it comes down to bullying situations and the sensitivity around that. I know Mr. Maris and we've had conversations about this and we continue to work on this as part of our comp planning. This policy is a step in that direction for us again. Again, you will see this every 3 years. This is one of those policies that's on an update cycle.
What's highlighted in yellow is the new material.
Correct. Those are the only recommendations we're looking to make.
Mr. Musser, for clarification with the cyberbullying, please correct me if I'm wrong. Outside of school hours, we have no control over.
Yeah, unless there's school activities, there's some type of school nexus to it. It's difficult to handle those situations.
Yeah. So one of the things I've seen is the cyberbullying occurs outside of school. But the student comes to school in fear because of what occurred outside of school. Yeah. And so there's nothing really, how do we handle that?
We can still address that. What we can't do, or what we need to be careful as we do, is making those connections and how we are actually doing discipline. In those situations, what we'll try to do is we'll try to mediate the situation where we can. There are times where the behavior that has occurred outside is so egregious, it actually violates potential law. And then sometimes will involve law enforcement because they do have the ability to address that behavior outside of the school day.
So hypothetically, if a student is being bullied after school and they're in fear of coming to school and they come to their teacher, a lot of the bullying's been out of school. How do we handle that?
Yeah, so a lot the same way. We'll try to mediate things in school, but we just have to be careful with some of the discipline. Sometimes we'll involve families. It's very situational. Sometimes we also get things through safe to say reports, which we try to be careful and respect the confidentiality of all reporters. But at the end of the day, our primary goal, like discipline as a whole, is to have the behavior stop. Like, we're not looking for a punishment piece. It's not a pound of flesh. It's a ceasing of the behavior. So whatever stops that behavior, whether it's a phone call home to the student's parents, making them aware of the behavior that's occurring online. A lot of times, especially in the middle level, that's the case, that parents aren't aware of what's occurring because they're online. That gets it to stop. But at the end, we're looking for a cease of behavior. The only thing the districts need to be careful of is doing discipline on situations where we don't technically, for the lack of a better term, have jurisdiction over.
Yeah, the frustrating part that I witnessed a couple of years ago firsthand was the bullying was going on after school. There's no doubt it was not during school. But when the child got to school, and I'm talking about even to high school, not elementary or middle, when they got to school, it was subtleties like staring at you, laughing at you in the middle of class that made that person scared. They went to their principal and their counselor. That principal and counselor was working, trying to talk to the other people. It was not working. It actually took other students, almost, for lack of better words, vigilante type tactic, to just go up to those people and say, listen, it's enough now.
Yeah.
It wasn't anything that we could control. And I'm frustrated because I think that happens a lot, to be honest.
Well, even the stuff that's occurring in the school, though, those are things we can act on.
But how are you going to just act on someone smiling or laughing at someone?
Unlike law enforcement, the administration has an incredible amount of latitude to address student situations to maintain a safe school organization. So if it's one of those things where they feel like it's happening, they can take action. They don't have the burden of proof that law enforcement has. And it's one of the things too, when we work with community members that are in that same boat, nobody wants to call the police on a bullying situation. No one wants to involve the police in these situations, but there are certain times when that really is the correct option. And we try to counsel parents through and what to say and what are potential outcomes. And sometimes it's just a conversation with law enforcement too, because we're all in the same outcome of just ceasing the behavior. We don't want to tie up the court systems with kids and bullying. We don't want to tie up the school districts with these situations either. But this is a very serious behavior that interferes with the child feeling comfortable and able to learn. It's just like being hungry. If you're afraid of going outside in the hallway after sitting in there, you're not going to be able to engage in the classroom. So that's the end goal.
I guess this question is more for Mike and the principals. How successful have we been with the whole cyberbullying? Because I think what Dylan says is a struggle. And have we been more successful? Have we been doing things? Have the teachers been receiving training? Because I think this is one of the primary ways kids bully now.
So the cyberbullying is more difficult now than before. So we've been working with the Attorney General's office, having them working with all of our students, K-12 and staff. The other part, though, as Dr. Musher shared, a lot of the cyberbullying components that are occurring, whether it's different platforms, et cetera, that's where we do need individuals to quickly or promptly contact law enforcement when it's outside of school. And if it's on district devices, that's a different story. We have the ability to collect information and be able to look at least, where they're sending, in terms of like if they're at their home versus in their school, how their iPads were being used. There are platforms, though, when someone sends something, unless someone screenshots it, it does disappear. So we do have instances where people do screenshot and then bring it forward, and a lot of times people will bring it to us in the school setting, so we can counsel them, we can work with students and families, help them understand, what our line is versus what police can do. But I will say, in having conversations with police chiefs around this topic, it is very difficult to get information from the social media platforms due to the need for different types of warrants and how quickly you can get it and whether it will be turned over depending on how fast or how long people want to pursue a situation. Typically, what we find on the cyberbullying side is once they start to engage with law enforcement, then people back off because of how long it takes. It's not the police officer's fault. It really has to do with the interactions with the social media platforms. So that's where trying to advise parents on putting the safe protocols in place, making sure kids aren't using the platforms when they're not at the appropriate age, helping parents understand, being vigilant when their kids are online, what they're accessing, and trying to help kids understand in school and out of school that once they hit send or post, it never goes away.
So I guess my question is, if it's not serious enough to contact law enforcement, but it's still bullying, like Dylan said, the class finally resolved it by the kids telling the kids to stop it. But are our teachers afraid to approach bullies and correct them? Doesn't have to be
It's not about being afraid to address the bully. It's about where it's happening and what's the impact and where the impact is occurring. That's the challenge when it comes to bullying. And there have been recent court cases where there's a true clear delineation or separation between what happens outside of school versus in school. And as a district, we cannot take action on anything outside of school. If there's a carryover to something in the school, there's some things we can do depending on how severe the impact when you look at the definition of bullying. As Dr. Muster shared, administrators at the building level do have latitude at times when it comes to some of those subtleties, some of those pieces that we can prove, or at least we have repetitive pieces coming forward to be able to put some things in place. But Mr. Maris, to your point, a lot of it is happening on social media, online platforms for students. And that's the most difficult one right now to tackle.
But I don't want you to think that if a kid comes in and they're having an issue with this, that it's going to be one of those things where we go, oh, where'd that happen? Okay, we're good. We can't help you. Like,
Correct.
no, we're going to work through our channels. Our channels are just going to be a little bit different than they would be if it was on a district device or during a school activity where we have, the ultimate say on the outcome.
Great. Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments about 249? My only technical suggestion is under Title IX, insert the word reasonably between be and interpreted. It's just to insert, so every report of alleged bullying that can be that can reasonably be interpreted.
Okay.
All right, with those changes, any objection to moving to first reading? All right, we'll move that to first reading. And 250 student recruitment.
So the next two policies are both falling into that original category. We talked about our first two policies. If you look at the date there, they're 2015. The next policy is the acceptable use policy. That also is a policy that just needs to be updated from a date standpoint. We are not recommending any changes. There aren't any changes as far as our providing accessibility to our students, the district's right to disclose to parents that information is going out, and that parents also have a right to not have their students participate in some of those recruitment activities as they see fit. I don't think there's been changes on this policy going all the way back to 2006. So again, this one, I'm just looking for a review date from the board.
I'm good.
Any concerns with either 250 or 815? Mr. Mauer, Mr. Garber?
I'm good.
All right,
I'm good.
all right, any objection moving them both to second reading since there are no changes? All right, we'll move them both to second reading. And then we have one policy up for discussion, policy 903, public participation in board meetings. This policy was last reviewed about 15 months ago. Since then, several members of the Board of Administration have expressed concern about some aspects of the policy, so we thought it appropriate to bring it up for discussion to see if there's anything, if we want to revisit this policy at this time.
Can you outline the areas of concern? It's over. I'm over here. Can you outline the areas of concern? You've heard?
The concerns, I have heard several concerns. But again, and these are in no particular order, from board members, from community members, from members of the administration. That I've heard concern around the 5 minutes to speak during regular board meetings. I have heard concerns around speakers' failure to adhere to the guidelines for speaking in terms of topic and sticking to topic. I've heard concerns around decorum, things like that. So I guess the question is, we looked at this fairly recently. Is this something that we want to revisit at this time?
I mean, I'll just chime in. To me, I don't know what we would revisit unless there's a reason to revisit, which was the impetus for my question as to what concerns we're hearing. So taking each one of those three things you just mentioned in order, what's wrong with the 5 minutes?
I'm not advocating anything. I'm simply
Okay.
bringing this policy as the chair of the committee because several individuals asked that that be done.
I'm one of those
I'm not
individuals.
advocating
Okay.
one way or another at this point.
Got it. Okay.
I think we need to consider relooking at the time limit for the regular meeting
Up or down?
down. I don't think we need to have 5 minutes. I think that it's been evident the last couple of meetings that people can articulate what they need to in less than 5 minutes. I think that some of those things break off into tangents a little bit, and the people that aren't prepared end up. And it would encourage people to be a little more prepared. The other thing that I was concerned about is we had that inconsistency with the poster signs and banners. We need to decide how we're handling that moving forward. I think we had a slip up when someone wanted to do a presentation and they actually had signs up. And that confused people that when we told them they couldn't have signs for other reasons. And I think that we need to decide, are we doing it or not? Or are we going to define it differently? As you can have a presentation, but how do you determine that? Because
Right.
we had a sign in here that they would argue was a presentation sign, but it really wasn't.
We have it, and to that point, Mr. Bard, we had an incident a couple of weeks ago where a member of the audience attempted to distribute literature to other members of the audience. That's not really addressed. Class signs and placards are addressed, but distribution of literature is not addressed.
Yep.
How granular do we want to be on encouraging robust community participation while maintaining an appropriate level of decorum and control over the conduct of our meetings?
I think it's a fair question, right? I mean, because if you wanted to nitpick, you could be like, well, you've got to speak into the mic. Well, you've got to stand 13 inches away from the mic. Well, you got to use the podium.
I'm sorry, Mr. Watt.
To me, you can get. Can I go louder? I don't know. So,
Closer to the mic.
I'm 13 inches away. I guess to me, I don't know. I'm open to discussion, but I also don't want to nitpick the heck out of something for no reason, right? I mean, if you really wanted to get into the weeds and live there for a while, you could nitpick every single thing that's said. And I want to be very careful not to do that. We did this 15 months ago and we went back and forth for 5-6 straight meetings about this. Now we're bringing it up again. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, unless there's a real need, I'm willing to, I'm open to the discussion. I'm open to discussion of, hey, is 3 minutes or 4 minutes make more sense than 5? Sure. I'm open to discussing that, but I don't know. I'll just go on the record and say, I don't want to make mountains out of molehills unnecessarily. I think it's a waste of our time.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Additional comments?
So, Mr. Barr, what were you thinking time limit if we were to reduce it?
I also want to mention 15 months ago, I was one of the people that strongly supported the 5 minutes at that period of time. But after experiencing this for the past year, I think 3 minutes on every meeting is fine. And I'm not the only person, but I'm only speaking for myself that thinks that.
Yeah, I think 3 minutes. I mean, that's what we use for our committee meetings now, right?
Yes, and it's been fine. No one's had trouble articulating what they need to in 3 minutes.
I mean, I think if you have a message, you should be able to articulate it in 3 minutes. What's everyone else think?
Additional comments?
I'm hesitant to shorten the time for the general board meeting. One reason for that is often members of the community have more than one topic that they want to address. And while they may be able to do that in 2 minutes and 1 minute, oftentimes you need more time. And I just feel like this is, one of the last places you can directly speak to your elected officials unless you go to the town meetings that some of our local state reps have. I think it's important. I know it's important. It informs me more. And part of that reason is because though I have had children who've gone to the school, I currently don't have any children in the school. And so it kind of gives me a pulse of what's going on in the community. As far as the signs, the one thing that was presented to us as a presentation that one time with a big long bar chart. In the past, people have just brought it, the packet to us or a copy of it and distributed it to us as board members. So we were the only ones that saw that. It wasn't shown to the public at all. So I think they should be able to, I don't know how it would be put in the policy at all, but to have, if you have something like that you want shown, then you need to print it out on a piece of paper and give it to the members of the board and the administration who are also sitting around the table as well.
I think, I actually like Mrs. Johnson's idea, and I think, like, going back to the example of a couple of weeks ago, I actually don't know what the flyer said. I think I glanced at it. Some members of the community thought it was relevant, others did not. I don't know that we should be in the business of saying what things are okay to hand out and which ones aren't. But I also don't think that we should be allowing people to disrupt our meetings by running through the audience and distributing literature. I might suggest a scenario where if a community member, if a speaker has something they wish to share with the board, that they be instructed to bring 9 copies or 10 copies of whatever it is with them, and they hand it out to the board. And if they wish to leave anything on the table for members of the public to retrieve or glance at, they're welcome to do that. But that we probably should not be allowing people to just hand things out willy-nilly in the audience. But if they have something they want to leave on the table, we can provide a table in the lobby for that purpose. Just an idea.
I'm not sure that distribution of anything like that within the boardroom should happen. It should happen before they enter in my opinion, before they come into the board. Generally speaking, the only door that people come in is here. The people who come in this way, it's a limited access entry. So if there are things that they want to pass out, I think it should be outside of the boardroom.
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing. Yeah,
Well, I wouldn't even put a table out there. So that's what I'm saying. If they want to pass it out, and then that's it. But yeah, nothing inside the boardroom
Right.
like that.
oh, Mr. Mauer?
In regard to the 5 minutes, I'm still in favor. While I agree that many points can be made within 3 minutes, and that's what we'd all prefer. 5 minutes, I think, is still appropriate because up until 2 years ago, we made a change to only have one full board meeting per month. And that effectively took away a speaking opportunity from the public. So that's a reason why I believe we should retain the 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mauer. Additional comments? Oh, Mr. Garber? Mr. Garber?
I'm with Pat on a lot of this. I don't really see the need if we really need to. Okay, but I'm good with how things are currently, and I think the 5 minutes is fine. There again, I don't have strong feelings one way or another. If anything, I would say I'm good with how it is.
Thank you, Mr. Garber. All right, additional comments? All right, well, we'll continue to study this issue, and if there are revisions to be made, they will be brought back to a subsequent policy committee meeting for discussion.
Mr. Keener, this is Mr. Mauer. I have a quick question.
Thank
Is
you, Mr.
there
Mauer.
anywhere in our policies regarding the utilization of Zoom? We discontinued the utilization of Zoom for public questions and or comments after COVID.
And there is nothing in the policy, as far as I know. Well, actually, no, I think we do say that people have to come speak in person, right?
It does say that somewhere. I just didn't know if it addressed Zoom in any way, shape, or form, or if that was just a former COVID policy we adopted on the fly, or an approach, I should say.
You know what? I stand corrected. I think when we rescinded that, we did it. It was not a policy change because it was never in the policy to start with. It was viewed as a temporary COVID measure.
That's what I thought.
Its own volition when COVID ended.
In regard to transparency of the board, is there any reason or thought for discussion to possibly permitting comments via Zoom and allowing the recording of our meetings to be maintained for a period of, say, 6 months for the public's review?
Those are certainly things that the board could consider.
It's listed here as item number 3. That a person can record it, but
Right.
I don't know. There's an environment here where people are asking for increased transparency. I think we're providing plenty, but I think it would be an act of good faith to make our recordings of our meetings available for at least 6 months, even 3. I think that's more than enough time for somebody to access it and or propose any questions then to the board.
I mean, the reality is that as it currently stands, members of the public are recording our meetings and putting them up on YouTube. So
there's truth to
formalizing the reality of what's occurring anyway doesn't strike me as problematic, but perhaps others have a different view.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it from an independent observer, public perspective here.
We save them until all the minutes are done and approved at the subsequent
Right.
meetings. So they are maintained for a short period of time. But what typically has become the practice that we're now experiencing is people file a right to know request. And we typically get them either the night of the meeting or the day after the meeting for the recording. And those individuals do get them if they're choosing not to record on their own. But Mr. Keener, to your point, there are individuals who choose to record. Mr. Mauer, one of the pieces that districts seem to be moving away from is when they post. Now, I'm not sure if this is what you're referring to, but if they post it online, you actually have to be fully compliant with ADA.
I got it.
That's why, and it's advised at times as well, depending on public speakers and what you're asking. Now, we're not doing this at this point, but a lot of districts are just reviewing this process in terms of how long they are keeping their meetings or minutes or the recordings for the minutes. I mean, it's something we could explore, just confirm with our new solicitor starting July 1, if they still recommend our current practice or would they recommend something different?
Yeah, I'm fine with either one. I had forgotten about the ADA related issues of maintaining them for a longer period of time. So I appreciate that input. Thank you.
I have a comment about the Zoom. We have often had speakers come and say, my friend couldn't be here, so I'm going to share their statement, and we allow that. Therefore, I don't think we need to have people speak over Zoom. I personally don't like it, and I just wish we didn't have to do Zoom at all. But I don't see any need to discontinue what we to allow people to speak, make their public comments on Zoom. I think they can continue to make other arrangements.
Other comments or questions?
I do have a question about the maintaining. That sounds like do we have the space? Is it a logistical task nightmare? I mean, what are we looking at here as far as staff obligations to maintain that?
It's
those
not a huge
recordings?
issue in the short term because we obviously maintain them for the minutes and things like that, as Mr. Marinski mentioned. Storing them in the long term with ADA, with transcriptions and everything else that would have to go with it becomes more of the challenge. Zoom does do live on the fly captioning, but if we're going to archive it, we'd have to move that to a different platform and then convert the captioning and everything else with that, which I haven't looked into.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. I appreciate that.
All right, well, we will continue to investigate this issue and determine whether further action by the policy committee is necessary. That concludes the policy portion of the meeting. I'll turn it over to Mrs. Johnston for education and programs.
Before we get started, do we need to take a break or you want to press on? Press on? Okay. All right. The first point on the agenda is early completion of the high school.
We're going to invite Mr. Snitzer here to present on early completion. Just for the board members' information, this is not anything that you need to vote on. We're bringing this forward as an informational item. As you'll hear from Mr. Snitzer, we have received more requests for this over the past several years. So we wanted to have some guidelines in place around seniors and students who are considering completing all their requirements before typical May graduation. So, Mr. Snitzer.
Hello, thank you for having me. So just to jump into explaining how early completion works, to be able to enter into your senior year, you need to have the correct number of credits going in there, which would be 24 credits plus to be able to start. We're able to do that because we offer block scheduling and would be able to do early completion, which other school districts often don't have as an option. And we do require 28 credits to be able to graduate, as well as completion of career portfolio and other district-based requirements to be able to graduate. Additional factors that are important when we're working with students to be able to develop, we'd go on to the next slide, thank you. To be able to develop and thinking about their process of going to early completion is that once they complete, they would be a graduated student, which would mean they would lose access to certain things such as PIAA and extracurricular activities. They would also be able to do everything they would need to do as a senior, such as graduation trips and the prom, but anything that would be done outside of the school or extracurricular within the school, they would not be able to have access to. They would also lose access to career supports, such as access to a counselor or other such things to be able to go forward, because they'd be entering their career or other life interests at that point, which I'll get to in the next slide. So why would students choose to do it? In reviewing with the counselors, the number one reason overwhelmingly, and they didn't have exact numbers when it came to it, but when it came to looking at it, was students were early completing to be able to go and earn money. Often they were entering their career. They had possibly graduated through a CTC program as a junior, and they were looking at being able to utilize their certificate in some ways, or they had a job lined up to be able to go and earn money. The other aspect of earning money was earning money to be able to afford to go to college or another post-secondary exploration. Students also have been given the opportunity to enter college, would be another reason why they would join. There are military incentives that have been coming out where if they are of age, they would be able to go to the military a little bit early and be able to start boot camp. Now the military is offering bonuses and other such things for their basic training to be able to start earlier. And finally, they spoke of one instance in which a student actually early graduated to do a trip that was about 2 months that they were able to explore. And they described it as sort of a once in a lifetime trip, but they'd reached that point. They had done everything they needed to do to be able to do early completion. And last, to look at the numbers, we've seen a steady growth of early completion students over the past 6 or 7 years. You will notice, and I did want to point out 2023, there was a dip of 3 students. When I reached out to the counselors for that, they didn't feel that that was much of a change from 21 and 22. It all stayed around that 28 to 30 range for students who were early completion. But then looking at 2024, we've started to have students putting inquiries in. We currently are at 40 students who are starting the process either through their counselors putting an application in or getting their compact and contract completed, or they have put it on their schedule that they plan on doing early completion. And that's where our numbers are lying at right now. Yes.
Mr. Schnitzer, want to go back to slide 3. The part about I'm able to take part in PIAA competition and extracurriculars. Does that, even if a student graduates in December, like a semester early, they're not eligible for anything in the spring?
They would no longer be a student at Hempfield, so they wouldn't meet the requirements for PIAA to participate in a.
Okay, how about, because I thought we had a situation just this year where at least one of our seniors, our graduation occurred before the state track and field finals.
That is a different situation because that'd be the natural progress. The season was in place. And I did actually do a look into when it came to state competitions, that wouldn't apply in the same way. It's more regular season and state, it wouldn't impact the same way. Graduating early as a group would not be an issue, but graduating in January would be an issue because they would no longer be a student under that clause.
Yeah, they still have baseball playoffs.
Those are-
I saw a wrestler this year for Penn Manor that did, you mentioned the military. And he did finish school, but he still got to go to the LLE tournament. And then he left that next day.
I can't speak for Penn Manor, so
Well, I mean, but I guess that. I think
Lay
that's-
thing though, that's why.
That's our point.
that's a
I think.
PIAA thing. Yeah.
Is it a
No, but-
PIAA rule or is this your rule?
Well, the sport starts in the fall, so that's probably why it's okay. I would get.
The season when the season in season, they would be able to complete.
So, Mr.
I will
Schnitzer,
look further into it, but when I looked into athletics, if the season was close to completion, they would be able to complete. So in the case of graduation taking place in January, it would, if they were to go not much further, it would be that way, but I will verify that with PIAA.
Yeah, I think I'd be curious about that, and I think that there are some situations where I can envision you saying, no, you're done, you shouldn't be able to compete. But there are others that feel different to me. And I would want to know if this is a PIAA rule or if this is just a Hempfield policy that maybe could be revisited.
I'll explore that.
And actually, the IAA could have changed on that
Yeah.
within the last couple of years, one way or the other.
What, I know what extracurriculars are, but just for clarification, for example, they wouldn't be able to come back for dance theater or play productions or
To my knowledge,
concerts or anything like that.
if they had not started that activity already, they would not be able to.
So if they were
participate.
in it in the fall, they can come back and do that, even though they're not officially students?
Well, dance theater is a spring activity, so they wouldn't be able to.
Oh, I thought they started rehearsals in January or earlier. No, not true anymore?
I could look into that further, but
I'm just curious because they're going to be different questions. And just so that we are, that you're clear
Mhm.
and we can be clear. But some of those things, the rehearsals start really early. Earlier than what you're saying they're going to be to finish. But that could have changed. That was 4 years ago when I had experience with that.
So I can just jump in here. So when
Okay,
you graduate in January, so that would be like Martin Luther King Day. So
Mhm.
think January 12th, like
Mhm.
you're not a student with us anymore. So you're not going to participate in our extracurriculars,
Okay,
spring musical, dance theater, all those things fall after that. They're no longer our student. So we run into issues with insurance and all sorts of other things.
Sure.
So that would be a big part of why they wouldn't.
and so then I would say that would, because there's excuse me, a distinction here between the sports competitions and then school curricular, and I think that needs to be clarified. That's really all I say.
Okay.
Yeah,
One of the things that I will share, at least in my experience in this arena, is that most of the students that are going through early completion have a plan. And part of that plan has nothing to do with the high school anymore, because otherwise it's an election, they're choosing this option.
Mhm.
So if there's a question about sports eligibility or other things that they want to participate in, they're not selecting the early completion. A lot of them, in fact, the ones that I dealt with most recently were a military situation where we had to actually write a letter to the military organization saying, yes, the student is early completion and they are good to go. And they didn't return. What we wanted to do is we looked at some other districts, was still balance some of those quintessential high school experiences like the prom
Mhm.
and walking, and still allow students to experience those. So that's why we have it carved out that way. But for the most part, the students that are doing early completion are really moving on with another chapter in their life, which is why they selected that course of action.
Right, I can just see potential for a lot of questions. I think what you've done and what you've come up with is totally appropriate. Just-
So they do get to walk a graduation then,
Yes,
if they choose to.
if they choose to.
And to be clear, there is an application they fill out that explains what they can and can't do through
Yeah.
early graduation. So nobody's surprised by this.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Musto. I think in the vast majority of cases, these students are graduating because they want to be done with us, and Godspeed, and they'll have a wonderful life. But I just would not want there to be an overly rigid black and white policy that doesn't thoughtfully consider occasional situations where involvement might be appropriate. So that's, I guess, what I'm trying to figure out here.
Yeah, so we'll dig into the PIAA a little more. At the end of it, though, that's the whole policy. The way we have it constructed is that the students can do basically everything we can actually allow them to do. At least our understanding as it is now is we can't actually allow them to participate. So we'll have to get confirmation on that.
Yeah, because the scenario I was thinking of, besides the military, because military, they actually leave. Is you brought up the point of them choosing to go into the work world. It's because they choose they want to be there from 7 to 3 instead of here 7 to 3. That doesn't mean that they necessarily, when they elect to end their high school extracurricular PIAA athletics, especially if it's in the middle of the season. That's what I'm curious about, if it matters whether the season already started and you get to finish it. Because like wrestling, for instance, I'm just using that because I know it, or basketball, it starts in November, just before Thanksgiving, the Friday before Thanksgiving, I think I'm correct. And it ends sometime in the beginning of March. And you technically graduate in January. So does that mean since you started your season, you get to complete it? And let's say you're in the work world, or does that mean you're done the day that you graduate? I would say that I don't think that's the way with the PIAA. I'm not saying what we do here, only because I've witnessed it with the people going in the military. This year, it wasn't like 10 years ago.
It sounds like just some murky areas for us. I can speak from the military. If you want to go to a certain school and you don't show up on that day, you maybe lose your slot forever. So that for sure is totally different. So. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Curriculum updates, our favorite thing.
So as Ms. Dicey said, last month, the high school and middle school has several updates that they would like to bring forward as well. So you will have information here from the math department and our English language development department. Ms. Dicey.
Oh, we already have it.
in your packet. I thought it might be easier. Okay, so as Dr. Dandridge mentioned, I have two departments here. So first of all, we're going to talk about math. And so with me today, I have Mike Gambler, who goes by the name of Mo, with us. And he is our new secondary math department coordinator who started in, I don't know, February or March. So he's been on board with me partway through this. So he will be able to answer some more of the technical questions about math, and then we'll move into English language development. So first of all, I talked at the last meeting a little bit about middle school, but didn't have the chance to share the big picture. And Mr. Maris, you asked for a flow chart, and I've got you a flow chart, which I had ready to go, but it's color coded and different shapes and everything because there are so many courses in our math offerings. So what we wanted to do, and I started working on this really 2 years ago, was looking at the end goal of our math programs. And so everything looking from the backwards of what happens in 12th grade and after. And we have traditionally done a phenomenal job at Hempfield with our AP classes. And our kids who are taking AP, Calc, AB, and BC do incredibly well on those exams and are often exempt from classes in college. And those are our students who are most likely to go into STEM-related careers if they need that level of AP Calc. What we weren't doing much with were other levels. So what else do kids do when they leave college that is not STEM related? And what kind of math do they need? Or when they leave high school, what other kind of math do they need for that? So for instance, many of our students go on to college and major in business careers and then are asked to take a different kind of calculus. And then we have students who go on to college who are not in any kind of STEM related field and are at most asked to take college algebra as their highest math class. So I wanted to look beyond just the very top kids and think about how can we make connections for other students as well. And then also think about our kids going into trades. So I really started this with the end in mind and then started to work backwards about what kind of offerings would be best for our students. Looked at what we had in place, what we could shift of what we already had in place, and then also look at what new we might want to offer. So the green classes on my flow chart are classes that we already had, but we're making some shifts in those classes. The first green one that comes up is pre-calc AP. We've always had a pre-calculus class. It was called, what was that one called? Analysis and something else, wasn't it? Or just math analysis. It was just called math analysis. But College Board is now offering a pre-calc AP class that kids can take an AP test for and could potentially get college credit for that class as well. And so we just wanted to make some tweaks to the existing class that we had and now make that one something that kids could take a new AP test and get credit for that too. Again, that might be the end of math for some kids because that may be enough for them depending on their future plans. And this would give them that high school class that they could get college credit for if they do well enough on the AP test. But then we also looked at what was previously our CP or college prep calculus class, which was a great class, but wasn't giving kids any kind of options beyond high school as far as getting any kind of credit for that class. And so we looked at the opportunity of connecting that to University of Pittsburgh College in the high school class, where a student could get credit for that with and take business calculus. And so that would be for the students who are not planning on going into STEM fields, but need calculus in college a different level. They would be able to take that as a college in the high school class through University of Pittsburgh. Again, that's just going to be tweaking an existing class that we have. And Mo's going to be teaching that. So I'm sure he can tell you much more about the calculus differences between what we're currently doing and what that would switch into. Additionally, like I said, we wanted to look at the kids who are going to college who don't even need calculus in college. And I always use my own daughter as an example for that. She went to college for speech pathology. She had taken what was equivalent to Hempfield's college prep calculus class in high school, went to college, and the highest math she needed was a college algebra class that was something she would have done like 3 years ago in high school. And as a parent, I'm paying for this class that's backwards in her, what she was capable of doing. But we thought if we can offer kids a college algebra class as a college in the high school class, which we can do through Harrisburg Area Community College, those students would be able to get that class completed while in high school. And so we looked at what we offered as our Algebra 3 class and are going to look at changing that Algebra 3 class into a college algebra class that again would work through HAC. Of course, students can take the college and the high school classes just like the other college and the high school classes that we've started and just get high school credit for it. They do not have to take it for the college credit. That's always an option for the student. They could get Hempfield credit and the college credit at the same time, or simply just take the class for Hempfield credit as we've always had in the past. So those are the classes on there that are in green that are just simply shifting what we're currently doing to give kids more opportunity. Then again, all of those 3 classes were really looking at kids who are college bound. And then we started to say, what are we doing in our math classes for kids who are not college bound, but still need to get a 4th credit? After they have taken the Keystone exam for algebra, there are no other exams for math. So what kind of flexibility could we have with that? And so we started saying, instead of saying to those kids, you have to take algebra 2, let's see if we could find something more hands-on and practical for them. And so what we're proposing would be a math for trades class and a math for medical careers class. And those are the yellow classes on there. We would be looking at phasing these classes in so that the pre-calc they can start working on next year. The business calc would not become a CHS class until the following year, and the same with the college and the high school. So we could start making the adjustments for pre-calc this coming year because College Board has that class ready for 24-25, but we would need, or for 23-24, but we would be moving the other ones off until 24-25. So that's the big picture goals that we have, but I'll let Mo talk a little bit more in detail about any of the courses. And then we'll get to a little budget slide of what this would cost us and what we've budgeted for already and what would be in the following year, again, because this would be a bit of a phase-in approach.
Does anybody have any questions about any of the courses for the college classrooms?
I have a couple of questions, and they may be in the rest of the slides, I'm not sure. Several years ago, there was a discussion about offering an AP accounting. Is that the same thing or the equivalent of the business
No,
calculus?
AP accounting is in the accounting business department. That would be through the business department. Danny Walk was the chair there and he
So
just
that was
retired.
adopted. The
No,
AP.
no, it's a different course than the business calculus. Business calculus course.
No, my question was, there is an AP accounting class
Oh.
in the business department now.
No, there is not. And I'm not sure that AP offers an accounting class. We did talk about potentially moving into a college in the high school class for accounting. And I'm going to be working on that with Andy Wise, the new coordinator, but not as an AP class.
We did have an
Okay, and maybe it was just in the works possibly. I'm just thinking about kids who, they want to go work at business offices. Do we have those classes that can help them? Whether they work at the collection part of.
As far as they do offer accounting classes in the business department. The business calculus is more for like a student going to college and pursuing a degree in business or economics.
Okay.
That is a stepping stone that they would get 4 math credits for, like you go to Penn State, University of Pittsburgh. And also, like Kathy said, the students that do not want to take the CHS part, they just won't get the college credit. but we are teaching the course as if it's a college course.
Okay. Thank you for that information. And that if they go to Hack, I should know this, but I don't. Do they have to pay tuition at Hack?
Yeah.
Okay, and at University of Pittsburgh, these classes that we're doing, they have to pay for those.
Yes, and
Okay.
they would have to, for University of Pittsburgh, they have to take an Alex test. I believe it was $50 maybe.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
$20 that they have to get a 60% above to get into the course.
And that's all they pay.
Yeah,
Then the tuition is $75 a credit, which is nothing compared
Oh,
to.
oh, believe me, I know. My,
Yeah, I was just
my
gonna
kids
say,
have, they've gone to school. So,
I was just gonna say, we experienced be able to take the college classes at school here. And it is a bargain. And I like it a lot better than AP, no offense. I think it,
And we want to give kids a choice.
sure, I appreciate that.
and
Yeah.
well, I will say, the one regret that one of my daughters, one daughter, she's like, do I really have to go to college? The other one was, she really regrets that she did not take advantage of these opportunities, even though we pressed her to. She was like, no, and double no. So it really is a good program. That's why I have no idea how much it costs, because I never had to pay anything
Right.
for it.
What we really want to emphasize with kids is that they look to the schools that they want to go to. Like, they might not know exactly where they're going to be accepted, but maybe they have 4 or 5 universities that they're
Mhm.
interested in. It is really important, and this is part of what our guidance counselors do when kids are
Mhm.
selecting courses, that they look into the credit transfer at those schools and the AP policy, because kids can take AP tests, and there are some schools who don't take AP at all. But there are also classes or universities that might not take the hack credits. Most of them, all state universities are taking hack credits, but if they're going to someplace very elite, that might not help them at all, and the AP credit may help them more. So it's really important for them to do that research to know what's going to be best. The University of Pittsburgh credit transfer is phenomenal. I mean, those usually go just about anywhere, but it's also important for kids to realize that the grades that they get on those classes are real college credit grades. So if a student takes University of Pittsburgh class here and gets a C on that class, and then goes to the University of Pittsburgh, that class is still on their transcript as a C or whatever grade it is, because it's a real college course. So what's important is that kids make decisions best for whatever their next steps are.
I think I'm correct, though. If they didn't go to University of Pittsburgh and they went to any other university, it would just be a transfer credit, not the grade.
Right.
Does not affect your GPA.
yeah. So the previous CP calculus course, we did a great job in teaching that for years, and the students that leave here in that course do really well. Like, some of them, you do get engineers out of there, but business, and it gets them ready for college. With this, like Kathy said, this will give them their 4 credits, and it doesn't mean they can't pursue STEM opportunities later on in their life, because there's different, just way to teach it. We're going to take some things out, but add a lot more business and economic applications in it to help them be ready for their future and what they really want to do after high school.
I think it's terrific. I wish it would have happened when I went to college, because I remember you had a choice between whether you were taking the calculus for an engineer or the choice for business applications. And it was recommended, if you weren't sure if you were going to stay in business, to take the harder one. It really wasn't necessarily harder. It was just completely different applications. So even if you took the one for engineering, it didn't really apply to your business practices. You offered it in high school is awesome, I think. Thank you.
Yeah. The only difference is that we're going to teach it the same way as we would if we didn't have the CHS, except if they elect, there's going to be 3. There's 3 exams and a final exam, just like if you go to college. Again, their pick grade has a weight. The Hempfield grade has a weight in their pick grade as well. I believe it's 25% of their Hempfield grade goes towards their pick grade. So it's not completely just the 3 exams and the final. If they do it in high school, they honor some of your Hempfield grade as well.
Is it still true some of these AP classes, though, some of the universities only accept it if it's, you get like a 4 or 5 rather than a 3?
University to university.
That's why I like the college class personally.
Yeah.
They're all good.
I can tell you West Point in history only takes 5s. And then if you're going to major in math, you better have a 5 too, or a math related. Yeah, so would need to check that out because every school is very particular for sure. This looks great considering what I had in high school. It was senior math. That was it. I was like, thank goodness, math's not my thing. My other question was, how will this, does this impact class size and staffing, which equals not enough space or we need more money? Other than purchasing whatever it is we need to purchase, that's what I mean.
Actually, the next one's the budget slide. So this one shows that we're not asking for new staff. 3 of the classes are replacing existing classes.
Okay.
The
Mhm.
other 2, and I guess actually if you go back one slide, because we didn't talk about that. The other 2, the math for trades and the math for medical careers, would be classes that students would take instead of Algebra 2. So they're not taking additional classes. So what it would mean is using the current staff in different ways.
Okay. And we have enough. I know there, something come up when you lost a chemistry teacher, I think it was, is this session or that session going to be offered or not? So do any of these classes have a minimum attendance before they would be not taught that semester or that year?
Right. Well, we always work with Dr. Brassman on that. Oh, he's already. asked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Kathy's done a wonderful job and Mo have done a wonderful job coming up with a plan that utilizes our current staffing model. You asked about our staffing, our math staffing is tight. There's just no way around it. Our sections are big and we're tight. We're certainly making it work. You talk about, we had lost a science teacher, so yes, we're tight in science too. But the plan that she has works with our current staffing.
Thank you.
Although just because we have the audience, I will reiterate, remember my background is English, but math is the place that we are the tightest in the high school for staffing. So regardless of this plan, in the current staffing, math is tight. So back to the plan here, we're not asking for any new staff in order to implement this plan. We're just looking at curriculum prep, textbooks, and then for the trades classes, we wanted to request some extra money that we wanted to for supplies. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet because those classes need to be built. But for instance, if the math for trades class is working on angles for pipes, I want to make sure that we could have some real PVC pipe in the classroom that they could actually work with. And so we want to make sure that whatever hands-on learning could be associated with that. I don't think any more than, not even close probably to what science labs cost to equip, but just to have some of that. So we put a rough budget in there for that. Today we have the new textbooks for the calculus class and the pre-calculus class. We've already had those selected. So in your packets are the textbook approval for those. And we have those already in the existing 23-24 budget. Like I had already accounted for the fact that we were going to need those books for this coming year. And then the other classes, we have not selected the college algebra book yet because Hal gave us like 3 or 4 choices. And so we're working through what that would be, as well as Mo's been doing quite a bit of research on trying to see if we can find books that would be usable for the trades classes. So those are estimated class costs, and those would come in the 24-25 budget. I'm going to say anything about the books you've been finding.
Yeah, so for the medical math, I've contacted some contacts through LGH, some liaisons who they go about with the different LGH, UPMC, and I got some stuff forwarded my way. That course is not going to, is in no way means that it's going to replace what they like going to LGH and taking clinical math. It's just going to get them a taste of and see what it's all about if they're going to be interested in pursuing the health, the health field. So it's not a replacement course. It's just a different course, a different way to see math and how it relates to what they might get into after high school. And as far as the trades book, that's kind of it's a difficult task. It's going to be a lot of work and a lot of brainstorming to develop that course. But I think it would be a really good course to get established here at Hempfield High School.
Now, I know you coordinate with someone. I think I've recall coordination with Thaddeus Stevens. Is that still in play or possibilities?
So I've been in touch with Thaddeus Stevens for some suggestions on, again, what kind of math is needed for entrance exams there, because they actually have entrance exams. So we're going to
Mhm.
use that information as well to build this class, because again, these two classes are not designed to replace classes that they would take
The
in
preparatory.
post-secondary, but to make sure that they're prepared. And the other piece of the math for trades class that we want to include is some non-calculator math, because there's a section on the ASVAB test for military entrance that requires non-calculator. And now we're at a point where SAT next year is going to accept calculator on every portion of it. And so we get to the point where we're doing almost everything with calculators, and then kids come across the ASVAB and are not prepared for that kind of math. So that's another piece that we want to embed a unit in this class that would really push that mental math too.
Do you do any coordination with Penn College for technology? I think, what's the full name for technology?
We
Up at
haven't.
Penn
No,
School?
I haven't contacted them yet. No.
Well, the reason I was asking, my daughter went there for a while and we didn't buy books. We bought wrenches and toolboxes and that sort of thing.
That's like as far as the budget's concerned of how much we don't know what that's gonna take. We don't even know what the
Mhm.
course looks like. But we've brainstormed a lot as a department about what it could look like, and it looks really good and a lot of hands-on stuff. It's just,
Sure.
PVC prices
Yeah.
are through the roof right now. So sweet.
No,
So
I applaud you for including these two. I think that's important for our kids.
Yeah.
Mhm.
any other questions?
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mo. We'll move into English language development. And most of this is secondary, but there is an elementary piece as well. So Mr. Hoffman's going to come up to the area too, in case there are questions. But we have been working, this is a English language development curriculum writing year, and we have been researching, and Svetlana has had different vendors in, and we've had an assortment of books that we've been looking at to try to decide how can we best support our English language learners, K through 12. And we have come up with a few proposals of new materials that we would like to use. Materials in the English language development department have not been replaced in a long time. So I'm going to let Svetlana talk a little bit about each of these. The first one is the one that is for, is it just 1 to 12, not K to 12? Great. So grades 1 to 12. And this one is designed specifically for our newcomers, those coming to our schools without any English or very limited English. And then we have two programs, one for middle school and one for high school, that are for students who have been here for a little bit longer. And then eventually we'll probably come back with some elementary pieces for that K to 6, but we don't want to overwhelm our teachers with too much new at one time or too much training. And we also had already budgeted a certain amount for this year. And so what we're sharing today are, again, already in the amount that we allotted in the budget for 23-24. So I'll let Svetlana talk more about each of these.
Hi, so the Get Ready program, which is through Vista Higher Learning, specifically addresses newcomers. And as Kathy said, that is a specific set of students that are from another country and that have just come from another country in that same school year. And we've never really had that I have seen a curriculum that specifically addresses those students. And those students' needs are very unique, and it is going to be very beneficial for teachers to have the resources to meet those students' needs. And that's specifically what the Get Ready program does. It's also beneficial because it addresses students from 1 through 12, not for K, because kindergarten level students are progressing through language naturally. So it just looks different for them, even if they are newcomers. And it gives also teachers, even though the ELD programming looks different across the district in terms of elementary, middle, and high school, it's flexible enough to provide teachers with resources to address student needs, even though some of them are seeing them for an hour a day versus 3 hours a day. Moving on to Impact, which is through National Geographic. It's National Geographic is what we have used before. We are now using more specific versions of, or different versions, if I will, Impact is for the middle school specifically. And the reason that we're using Impact is because it is geared towards kind of like smaller chunks of ELD instruction. Because those teachers at the middle school level have ELA replacement and they also have to teach English language skills. This gives them the opportunity to kind of pick and choose smaller chunks of those to integrate into their ELA curriculum so that they're addressing both the, the core standards for ELA and English language proficiency at the same time. Moving on to great writing. So that is for the high school level. That is actually an excellent program and addresses a need that we have at the secondary level, specifically at the high school level for the writing program that we have for our English language development students. So writing is one of the domains that our students score lowest on each year on the WIDA exam. And this program, instead of addressing the content standards from grade to grade, as our core content standards do, it addresses the writing skills of students at each language proficiency level. So while most of our students receive writing instruction at the high school level in an ELA classroom and in an ELD classroom, we've never had a specific writing program that addresses each language proficiency level as they progress. And this gives us that. The 3 books are 3 specifically for the middle school program, which, as I said before, is ELA replacement and ELD at the same time. When Stars Are Scattered is a graphic novel. It's a nonfiction piece. Seed Folks, I don't know if I need to get into much detail about each specific one. Yep, that is a fiction piece. And The Skin I'm In by Sharon Flake is a fiction piece as well. Seed Folks and The Skin I'm In, although they are both fiction, they are actually designed for different ELD levels, English language proficiency levels, excuse me. Seed Folks is for the level 1 and 2s, while The Skin I'm In is more for the level 3s and 4s, which have a higher English language proficiency.
Can you talk about how they align? One of the questions that we had previously was, we were told that the book that was used, the novel that was used in ELA, and the one that you picked for ELD was supposed to support the help me out here. Oh, he left. Yeah, here.
Right, we
Yeah,
try to.
where it aligns and support what that was, and we found that that book, the Ghost Boys didn't support I was Rolling Thunder, whichever one it was, but
Right.
Civil War and then current, it didn't mesh well. So what do you do
Whenever,
now?
right, so whenever we're working on selecting books for middle school, or for high school for ELD, we have the challenge of the fact that we're teaching the English language arts core curriculum standards, and then we're also doing the language development standards at the same time in the same course. In fact, all of those secondary teachers have to be duly certified in order for us to use it as a replacement English class. So they have to have both English certification and English language development certification. So we're doing both at the same time. And so whenever we can, we want our curriculum to parallel so that students in the ELD program who eventually will be not in the ELD program anymore as they test out, have similar backgrounds and experiences. So we try to line them up where we can. But also within the ELA core curriculum, we have genre-based units, for instance, in 7th grade, where they are selecting from like 6 different fiction books for literature circles. Well, in the ELD curriculum, we can't parallel that in the same way because we can't have all those different texts going on at the same time. So like these fiction books would be similar to what we're doing in the English curriculum, but we can't have all the different books at one time because first of all, we have small groups, and secondly, they need much more guided support working through that. So they parallel the genres of the units that we're doing, but not always the content. We do the content when we can, because we're also tasked with, as Svetlana said, different levels of reading within our ELD curriculum. So some of our books are more simple than other ones based on what their ELD level is.
My understanding of the book with the ELD was supposed to aid in understanding, therefore should be similar to help when they go to the ELA class, which
Right,
the
but-
example that was brought to us
right,
last year, that was not happening.
correct.
So now that's not what you're looking for. You just want it to be the same genre?
In-
Is that what you're saying?
In these cases, they're not paralleling something directly in the curriculum. So for instance, another example that we don't need to bring to you because the book's already approved is we do a Holocaust literature circle unit in ELA 7. And we're using one of those books that it's already approved as the ELD book because it's a low enough level. So that's a unit that parallels exactly the same. Other times within the curriculum, what we're doing is a fiction unit, and there are many different books that we can use in that.
Right.
In this case, this is what what those are replacing are those books that could be used. In literature circles, or 8th grade does an enormous amount of self-selected independent reading, and we can't parallel that exactly in the ELD. And so when we can't parallel it exactly, that's what these books are matching up to.
So it's also important for those teachers, for ELD teachers, to take into consideration, not just paralleling what the ELA curriculum is doing, but also to understand what the ELD curriculum needs to be doing at that time. So yes, of course, they're trying to make students feel like they are getting the same curriculum as the 7th and 8th grade regular ELA, but there is the element of where should they be in their ELD progression, in their language progression, and what does that thematic unit look like, and how do these fit in? And it also becomes even more difficult when we consider their level of reading ability. So our options become narrower.
Of course.
And so these, after a long amount of time, best align to all of that.
My point in asking those questions, I'm in the process of reading these books, these 3 books right now, which I like the Seed Folks one. The question that came up, or the explanation that came up, was by reading Ghost Boys, that's supposed to help those ELD students totally keep up and understand with what's going on in the reading of the
Roll of
Rolling
Thunder, Hear My
Thunder.
Cry.
Thank you. Yeah, which I did read that. I just can't keep up with the title. So, and I did not see that was actually taking place. How did this help, understand that, other than, well, I just didn't see it at all. So that was our question. And then there was also a question about the content of that book, which we dealt with too, or we talked about. So I just want to make sure that the stated purpose isn't confusing for us. I'm an educator, and it was confusing for me. So what was happening there? So just want the stated purpose or guidelines when you select these different books, that they're not contradictory, or that they're actually doing what the stated purpose is for these books. That may seem nitpicky, but when you have people come and go, well, what does this have to do with this? And I read them and I have to go, I have no idea. It doesn't seem to match up with me. So if you're just saying, these are just books we're reading because we want the same genres and we want to improve their reading ability, which of course is what you want. So, and I'm familiar with the other book by Omar. I think I've heard him speak. You had him come last year to speak. Does he still live in Lang?
He does, and that was the middle school one book,
Right.
one school book this past year. And I
Mhm.
believe The Skin I'm In was a one book, one school several years ago. So
Mhm.
those are books that we have had great success
Mhm.
with the
Good,
whole student
good.
population being
Mhm.
interested in, and yet they all deal with issues and concerns that many of our English language learners would be facing themselves. And so again, as we're selecting the books, we want to select books that those students will connect with best.
Right, so exactly, and I think that helps. There's stories of immigrants. And as you know, I lived cross-culturally. We also worked with immigrants. I had to teach Korean students who could hardly speak English. So I understand what you're looking at, I don't have a direct experience like you do. I just want whatever the purpose is that's stated, that the guidelines, the parameters of what you're picking the books, that if we go and we look and we go, this doesn't fit. I just want it. Whatever you say, I want it to fit. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah. So I think they'll enjoy these books. In fact, I don't, what sounds like 2 of them you've done for your whole school readings. So that's good that the kids are already understanding some of the cultures that are there, that are there that we haven't within our schools. So thank you for taking the time to make those adjustments. I appreciate it. So, okay, I don't have anything else to say now.
The next slide is just our budget slide that breaks down the cost of each of these programs. And again, this money has already been accounted for in the 23-24 budget.
Okay. And these kids get these books to take home, right? The ELD. The books, the seedless or the.
Seed folks, we
Yeah,
will
those
have
three
enough
books.
copies for that. Oftentimes they're just reading them in class because they need the support, but they do have enough of them. They're not to keep like the one book, one school ones. They're just for use for that one unit and they return them so we can reuse them. Like when we do one book,
You
one
do that
school,
with
the
books
kids,
Anyway,
I'm sorry, what was that?
when you issue a textbook, don't they give it back anyway?
Right, right. I just
Okay.
didn't want you to confuse that with one book, one school where the.
Oh,
it's-
no,
it's
I know that's a
Grant
different
funded
program.
and they keep those
Yeah.
books because it's grant funded.
Yeah.
That's different.
Yeah. But these 3 books, they're issued to the students and they can take them home and practice reading them or share with their parents.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Is that it? Great. Thank you for all the hard work that you've done. I know it's been a heavy lift to make these adjustments. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I believe that's everything.
That's it for ed programs.
Motion
Sorry?
to adjourn to executive session.
One more thing, we do have the schedule of upcoming meetings, which is posted on our website. The next policy meeting and education meeting is July 20th. Okay. Thank you all for coming. Okay, now we can adjourn.
Motion to adjourn to executive session.
Second. All in favor? Okay, thank you.